Don't touch the water. Get the blue box now. The tiny voice cut through the panic of the Moretti mansion kitchen, and for a moment, nobody moved. Alessandro Moretti, the man whose name made powerful people choose their words carefully, was sitting on the cold marble floor, struggling to stay focused as the room around him blurred. But the person who moved first was not a bodyguard, not a doctor, and not the woman who had promised to stand beside him forever. It was Mia Carter, the 4-year-old daughter of the woman who cleaned the Moretti estate. She did not run because she was fearless. She ran because she remembered. The kitchen had been prepared for a private dinner, the kind where every plate was placed perfectly and every detail was controlled. Alessandro had spent his life believing control was the one thing money could always buy. But that night, control disappeared in seconds. The chef called for help. The guards stepped forward. Victoria Romano, Alessandro's fiancée, dropped beside him with the perfect expression of concern she had practiced for years. "Call the doctor," she said quickly. "Someone help him." Everyone followed her voice because everyone always did. Everyone except Mia. The little girl stood near the service table, holding a folded napkin in her small hands. Her eyes were not watching the adults. They were watching the cabinet near the hallway. The blue emergency case. A place she had been told never to forget. "Mia, stop," one of the staff members said gently. "Don't touch anything in there." But Mia looked back at Alessandro. She saw the same thing her mother Elena Carter had once described. The quiet signs. The way he held his hand. The way he looked like he wanted to speak but could not find the words. "My mommy said he needs the blue box," Mia whispered. The room became silent. Not because they believed her. Because they wondered how she knew. Victoria's expression changed for less than a second. Most people would have missed it. Alessandro noticed. Even while feeling weak, he noticed. He had built his entire life around noticing what others ignored. "Let her bring it," he said quietly. It was barely more than a whisper, but everyone heard him. Mia quickly moved to the cabinet. She climbed onto a small wooden chair, reached carefully, and pulled out the blue emergency case. She did not open everything inside. She did not pretend to understand what every item meant. She simply carried it back with both hands and placed it beside him the way her mother had taught her. "Your mommy taught you this?" Alessandro asked. Mia nodded. She said people forget small things. Small things can matter the most. That sentence stayed in the room longer than anyone expected. Elena Carter had worked in the Moretti home for years, but after leaving, almost everyone acted as if she had disappeared from the story. She was only a former employee, someone without influence, someone without a voice. Yet her daughter was standing in the center of a room full of powerful adults, holding the one thing that might help Alessandro when nobody else knew what to do. Victoria stepped forward with a careful smile. "Alessandro, she is just a child. We should let the professionals handle this." It sounded reasonable. It sounded kind. But Alessandro looked at the blue case, then at Mia, then at Victoria. Something did not fit. For the first time in years, the most powerful man in the room had a question he could not ignore. Why did a little girl know a secret that his closest people did not? And why did the woman he trusted most look more afraid of that answer than of losing him? The child did not save him because she was special. She saved him because someone had finally remembered what everyone else had forgotten. The sentence stayed in Alessandro Moretti's mind long after the doctors finished checking him. The private clinic inside the estate had become unusually quiet. The people who usually filled every room with confidence now stood carefully, waiting for Alessandro to speak. He was alive, but something had changed. For the first time in years, he was not looking for an enemy outside his walls. He was looking at the people standing inside them. Mia Carter sat on a chair near the kitchen doorway, her small hands wrapped around the old blue hair clip her mother had given her. She was not enjoying the attention. She was not trying to impress anyone. She looked tired, like a child who had been placed in the middle of a conversation far too large for her. Alessandro noticed that. "Mia," he said softly, "why did you know where to find that case?" The room became still again. Victoria Romano answered before the little girl could. "Alessandro, She probably heard something from her mother years ago. Children remember strange things. It does not mean there is anything more to it. Her voice was calm, almost comforting. That was exactly why Alessandro paid attention. Victoria always sounded reasonable. She never raised her voice. She never appeared nervous. But Alessandro had survived decades in a world where the smallest detail mattered. A person could hide a lie inside a smile. "I did not ask you," he said quietly. Victoria stopped. Only for a moment. But everyone noticed. Mia looked at Alessandro. "Mommy told me about the blue box," she said. "She said it was important because sometimes people forget what helps them." Alessandro leaned forward slightly. "When did your mother tell you this?" Mia looked down at her hands. "Before we left." The answer was simple, but it created a new question. Elena Carter had not worked at the Moretti estate for almost 2 years. She had left quietly after a disagreement with management. At least that was the story everyone knew. Alessandro turned toward his security team. "Find the old employee records." Victoria immediately stepped in. "Is that necessary? You just had a medical emergency. You need rest, not old stories." Alessandro looked at her. "A person who saves my life is not an old story." Nobody spoke after that. The investigation began with something small. Not accusations. Not anger. Just questions. Alessandro asked his security team to review the kitchen from the beginning of the evening. He asked the staff who prepared his meal. He asked who entered the room and who touched the table. Mia stayed silent through most of it. She did not point fingers. She did not blame anyone. When Alessandro asked her what she saw, she answered only what she knew. "The plate was different," she said. "Different how?" he asked. Mia thought. Carefully. The first plate had a flower on it. The other one did not. Everyone looked toward the dinner table. It seemed like a tiny detail, almost meaningless. But Alessandro knew something important. People who hide things often forget the smallest changes. The security footage was pulled up. The dinner appeared normal. Everyone moved naturally. Everyone smiled. Everyone acted like nothing was wrong. Then the footage stopped. 8 minutes were missing. Alessandro stared at the empty space on the screen. 8 minutes. Not an hour. Not a day. Just enough time for someone to change one thing and walk away. Behind him, Victoria quietly said, "Maybe the system failed." Alessandro did not answer. He looked back at Mia. A 4-year-old girl had noticed a different plate. A professional security team had not. For years, Alessandro believed power came from controlling information. Now he was beginning to understand something more dangerous. The person with the least power in the room had just revealed the first crack in the truth. And somewhere inside those missing 8 minutes was the answer to a question nobody wanted him to ask. Who changed the plate before he sat down? The missing 8 minutes were not a mistake. They were a message. Alessandro Moretti stood alone in the security room, watching the same piece of footage again and again. The kitchen looked ordinary. The staff moved normally. The dinner continued like any other evening inside the Moretti estate. But Alessandro had learned one lesson long ago. Ordinary moments were often where people hid extraordinary secrets. The screen showed the moment before his collapse. The chef placed the final dish on the table. Victoria smiled. The guests talked. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Alessandro paused the footage and pointed at the screen. Who removed these 8 minutes? The head of security, Marcus, looked uncomfortable. "We are checking the system. Could have been a technical problem." Alessandro did not look away. "A technical problem does not choose the exact moment before I became sick." Nobody answered. Across the room, Mia Carter sat quietly beside her mother. Elena had arrived after, being contacted by the estate. She looked nervous standing inside the place where she once worked. She held her hands together, almost as if she was trying to make herself smaller. Alessandro noticed that too. For years, he had seen people enter his home wanting something. Money, influence, protection. Elena looked like someone who wished she could disappear. "Elena," Alessandro said, "why did you teach your daughter about my medical case?" Elena looked at Mia first. Then she looked at Alessandro. Because I was afraid one day nobody else would remember. The answer was not what he expected. Alessandro leaned back. Remember what? Elena took a slow breath. That you are not just a name on a company building. You are a person with a condition that requires attention. Victoria, standing near the doorway, interrupted politely. This is becoming emotional, but emotion does not prove anything. Alessandro turned toward her. No, it does not. He looked back at Elena. That is why we need facts. For the next hour, Alessandro asked questions. Not accusations. Questions. He asked about the night Elena left. He asked who approved her dismissal. He asked why the emergency information she kept was not included in his current medical file.
Elena answered carefully.
She did not blame anyone. She only described what happened. She had written notes about Alessandro's condition because the official records were incomplete. She had asked for the information to be reviewed. Then, days later, she was told her position was no longer needed. Who told you that? Alessandro asked.
Elena hesitated.
The household manager. Alessandro looked toward the old employee records. Another missing piece. Mia sat quietly during the conversation. She did not understand all the details. She only understood that her mother was being asked questions. When Alessandro noticed her holding the old blue hair clip, he asked, "What is that?" Mia looked down. Mommy had it when she worked here.
Elena smiled sadly.
She found it in the garden years ago. She kept it because she said small things can remind people of important moments. Alessandro looked at the clip, then at Elena. A memory returned. Years earlier, during a difficult time in his life, Elena had been the only employee who noticed he was struggling. She never asked for anything. She simply made sure he ate, rested, and followed his medical instructions. He had forgotten, or maybe he had allowed himself to forget. Then Marcus entered the room holding a tablet. "Sir, we found something." Everyone turned. On the screen was a copy of the kitchen access log. Someone had entered the kitchen 8 minutes before the missing footage. Not a stranger. Not an outsider. Someone with permission. Alessandro read the name. His expression changed. It was not anger. It was something colder.
Surprise.
The person had access because Alessandro trusted them. Victoria watched his face carefully. Too carefully. And that was when Alessandro noticed the smallest detail. She did not ask who it was. She already knew. For the first time, the question changed. It was no longer about who entered the kitchen. It was about who had been expecting him to find out. And why was Victoria afraid of the answer before anyone even said the name aloud? The most dangerous question was not who entered the kitchen. It was why that person believed nobody would ever notice. Alessandro Moretti stood in his office overlooking the estate grounds, the city lights reflecting against the glass behind him. On his desk were the kitchen access records, the missing camera footage report, and the old medical notes Elena Carter had kept hidden for years. Everything pointed toward a problem that was becoming harder to ignore. Someone inside his own home had changed something that night. Someone trusted. Someone with permission. Marcus, his head of security, placed a folder on the desk. "Sir, we traced the kitchen access log. The person who entered before dinner was not a stranger." Alessandro opened the folder slowly. He already knew the answer would matter. Who was it? Marcus hesitated. Victoria's assistant entered the kitchen area for 3 minutes. The room became quiet. Alessandro did not react immediately. That was what made people fear him. He did not need to raise his voice when information changed everything. "Find out why," he said. But, quietly, he did not want rumors. He did not want assumptions. He wanted proof. Later that afternoon, Alessandro returned to the kitchen where everything had started. Mia was there with Elena, sitting at the small table near the window. The same table where employees usually ate when they were not serving others. Alessandro noticed something strange. Mia was drawing. Not a picture of a house or a person. She was drawing the kitchen. "What are you making?" he asked. Mia looked up. "The table." Alessandro studied the paper. A child drawing would normally be simple, but Mia had placed small marks beside certain objects. A plate, a glass.
Un cabinet.
Why did you draw those? He asked. Mia pointed at the paper. Because Mommy taught me to look for things that move. Alessandro looked at Elena. Move.
Elena nodded slowly.
When you work around important people, you learn that small changes can matter. She looked uncomfortable saying it. A different cup, a different plate, a different person standing in a different place. Alessandro looked back at Mia's drawing. The little girl was not investigating. She was remembering. That difference mattered. He asked Mia a simple question. Can you show me what was different? Mia stood up carefully and walked to the kitchen table. She did not touch anything. She only pointed. This plate was here. Then she pointed to another place. This one was there. Alessandro followed her finger. The arrangement matched what the security footage showed before the missing 8 minutes. The chef had moved one plate. But why? Alessandro asked the kitchen staff to bring the original serving records. Within minutes, another detail appeared. The chef had replaced one ingredient list before dinner. Not the entire meal. Only one part. A small change. A change that most people would never notice. Victoria entered the kitchen at that exact moment. Her expression was calm. Are we really questioning the staff because of a child's drawing? She asked. Her tone was gentle, almost protective. Alessandro turned toward her.
No.
We are asking questions because facts changed. Victoria smiled slightly. And you think a 4-year-old knows more than
Professionals?
Alessandro looked at Mia, then at the records. I think a 4-year-old noticed something professionals ignored. For the first time, Victoria had no immediate answer. It lasted only a second. But Alessandro saw it. A pause. A hesitation. A moment where the perfect image disappeared. He decided to test something. Not Mia. The adults. He ordered the chef to recreate the same dinner using the same ingredients from the records. Then he changed one thing. He asked the staff to bring out 2 versions of the same dish. One was prepared exactly as before. The other followed the official recipe. He placed both in front of the kitchen team. Which one was served that night? He asked. Everyone looked uncertain. Then Mia quietly stepped closer. She did not touch either plate. She only looked. That one, she said, pointing to the first plate. How do you know? Alessandro asked. Mia answered simply. Because Mommy said the smell was different. Nobody spoke. Alessandro looked at Victoria. She was no longer looking at Mia. She was looking at the plate, as if she already knew which one Mia had chosen. And that was the moment Alessandro understood something important. Mia was not the mystery. Mia was the person revealing it. The real mystery was why the people around him were so afraid of what a child remembered. And what would happen when Alessandro discovered what they had tried so hard to make him forget. The first piece of evidence did not reveal the entire truth. It revealed something more dangerous. It proved that someone inside the Moretti estate had been carefully hiding pieces of it. Alessandro Moretti sat at the long dining table where everything had started. The room looked completely normal now. Clean plates, polished silverware, fresh flowers. But Alessandro no longer saw a beautiful dinner setting. He saw a place where someone had changed one small thing and expected nobody to notice. Marcus placed another folder beside him. We found the supplier records from the kitchen, he said. There was a replacement order made the morning of the dinner. Alessandro opened the folder. Inside was a receipt from a specialty food supplier. One ingredient had been delivered under a different account. The amount was small. The order was not unusual enough to immediately raise suspicion. That was exactly what made it concerning. Alessandro looked at the receipt again. Who approved this? Marcus answered carefully. The request came through the kitchen, but the account used to pay for it belongs to a private household service account. Alessandro knew what that meant. Someone wanted the change to look ordinary, not like a plan, not like a secret, just another routine decision made inside a large estate. Across the room, Victoria watched silently. She was still calm, still elegant, still the person everyone expected her to be. But Alessandro had learned something important. Person could control their words. They could control their expression. But they could not always control what they reacted to. "Bring me the original medical file," Alessandro said. The request surprised everyone. His current doctor had always assured him that his records were complete. Within an hour, the file arrived. Alessandro opened it slowly. Then he saw the difference. Several pages were missing. Not damaged. Not lost. Removed. The information about his emergency response plan was incomplete. The same information Mia had somehow remembered from years earlier. The room became quiet. Alessandro looked toward Elena. "You knew this information was missing?" Elena lowered her eyes. "I knew something was wrong. I tried to tell people." "Who?" Alessandro asked.
Elena paused.
"People who told me I was only an employee." The words were simple, but they carried years of being ignored. Alessandro looked away for a moment. He remembered every meeting where he had discussed money, security, and business decisions. Yet he had never asked why Elena left. He had never investigated. He had accepted the explanation because it was easier. Mia sat beside Elena, holding her mother's hand. She did not understand the full conversation. She only understood that her mother was finally being heard. Then Marcus returned with another update. "Sir, we checked the supplier account. It was connected to a company called Belmont Medical Services." Alessandro looked up. "That name means something." Marcus nodded. "It is connected to Dr. Hayes, your private physician." The room changed immediately. The doctor who had been responsible for protecting Alessandro's health was now connected to the missing records and the altered order. But Alessandro still refused to make a decision without proof. He had built his empire by understanding that suspicion was not evidence. He needed something stronger. He needed something that could not be explained away. "Find the connection between Victoria, Dr. Hayes, and that account," he said. "And do not let anyone know we are looking." Later that evening, Mia walked past Alessandro's office and stopped at the open door. She held the blue hair clip in her hand. "Mr. Moretti," she said quietly. Alessandro looked up. "Yes, Mia?" She placed the clip on the desk. "Mommy said this was important." Alessandro picked it up. It was just a small piece of plastic. Something most people would throw away. But inside the clip was a tiny folded paper Elena had hidden years earlier. Alessandro opened it carefully. His eyes moved across the handwriting. Only one sentence was written there. "If they change the records, check who benefits." Alessandro looked at the note for a long time. This was no longer about a mistake in the kitchen. It was about someone changing the truth itself. And now he had to find out who had been preparing for him to disappear from his own story. The note was only one sentence, but to Alessandro Moretti, it felt heavier than any accusation. "If they change the records, check who benefits." He read the words again in silence. Elena Carter had not written a warning about a person. She had written a warning about a pattern. Someone had not simply hidden information. Someone had carefully created a situation where the truth would disappear. The next morning, Alessandro made a decision that surprised everyone. He did not call Victoria. He did not confront Dr. Hayes. He did not announce an investigation. Instead, he asked Marcus to find Elena's old employment records and every document connected to his medical history from the last 5 years. Quietly, Alessandro said, "I want facts, before I want answers." It was the first time in years that he chose patience over control. Meanwhile, Elena sat in the small guest room of the estate, looking through old papers she had kept in a worn folder. Mia sat beside her, coloring quietly. The little girl did not understand the complicated questions surrounding her mother. She only knew that her mother had been treated like someone whose words did not matter. Alessandro entered the room holding the folder from the security office. "Elena," he said, "I need you to tell me everything you remember." Elena looked surprised. "Everything, everything." She took a slow breath. "When I worked here, I noticed small changes in your routine. Your medication schedule was different. Your emergency information was not always where it should be. I told the household manager, but I was told I was worrying too much. Alessandro looked down. And then you left.
Elena nodded.
I was told my position was no longer needed. The words were calm, but Alessandro understood what they meant. She had not simply left. She had been removed from a place where her knowledge was inconvenient. At that moment, Marcus entered with new information. Sir, we found the connection. He placed a tablet on the table. Belmont Medical Services is not only connected to Dr. Hayes. It also received funding from a company owned by one of Victoria's family partners. Alessandro studied the information carefully. This was the first clear connection between the people around him. But there was still something missing. A connection was not a confession. A suspicion was not proof. He needed the final piece. Marcus continued. There is more. We found an old email from Dr. Hayes requesting access to your emergency records. The request was approved by Victoria's assistant. Alessandro looked at the screen. The date was almost 2 years earlier, before Elena left, before anyone noticed a problem. The timeline changed everything. This was not something that happened suddenly. It had been developing quietly while everyone believed nothing was wrong. Alessandro closed his eyes for a moment. The person he trusted most had not just failed to protect him. She had been standing close enough to control what he knew. Then Mia walked into the room holding a small notebook. Mr. Moretti, she said. Mommy wrote this too. Alessandro looked at the notebook. It was filled with simple notes. Not secret codes. Not complicated information. Just reminders Elena had written while caring for him. Drink water. Check the medicine. Ask questions when something feels different. Small things. The kind of things people ignored because they seemed ordinary. Alessandro looked at Mia. Your mother wrote all of this for me?
Mia nodded.
She said people with big houses still need someone to remember little things. That sentence stayed with him. Alessandro had spent years surrounding himself with people who protected his position. But Elena had been protecting him as a person. Later that evening, Alessandro reviewed one final document. It was a household report showing who requested changes to his medical information. One name appeared repeatedly.
Victoria Romano.
He did not react. He simply placed the paper down. The man who had built his reputation by predicting other people's moves finally understood the truth. Someone had been studying his weaknesses for years, but they had made one mistake. They forgot about the little girl who remembered what everyone else ignored. And now Alessandro had to decide whether he would expose the person closest to him or continue protecting the image of the life he had built. The most dangerous moment for Alessandro Moretti was not when he discovered the truth. It was when he had to pretend he did not know it. For years, Alessandro had built his world around control. Every decision had a purpose. Every person around him had a role. But now he understood something that changed everything. The person closest to him had been hiding information while the people he overlooked had been protecting him. Alessandro stood in his office looking at the documents spread across his desk. Victoria Romano's name appeared again and again. But he did not call her. He did not demand answers. He did something much harder. He waited. If she believes I know nothing, she will show me what she is trying to hide. Alessandro told Marcus. The security chief looked surprised. You want to continue acting like everything is normal?
Alessandro nodded. No.
I want her to believe everything is normal. It was not a game. It was a choice. Alessandro needed the complete truth, not just a reason to be angry. That evening, Victoria arrived at the estate as usual. She walked through the front doors with the same confidence she always had. She smiled at the staff. She asked about Alessandro's recovery. She played the role of the concerned fiancé perfectly. I was so worried about you, she said, sitting across from him. Alessandro looked at her carefully. I know. Victoria reached for his hand. You need to stop working so much. You need people around you who truly care. The words sounded perfect. Almost too perfect. Alessandro smiled slightly. You are right. Trust matters.
Victoria relaxed.
She believed she had control again. But behind the scenes, Marcus and his team continued gathering information. They reviewed financial records connected to Belmont Medical Services. They checked communication logs. They examined the timeline of changes made to Alessandro's medical information. Then they found something unexpected. A message from Dr. Hayes to Victoria's assistant. The message was not a confession. It was not an obvious plan. It was a simple request. Confirm the updated records are complete before the next review. The words seemed harmless, but the timing was impossible to ignore. The records were changed shortly before Alessandro's medical emergency. The next discovery came from the kitchen. The head chef, who had remained quiet since the incident, finally agreed to answer questions. He admitted that someone had asked him to replace one ingredient in Alessandro's meal. He did not know why. He believed it was a normal request from management. The person who gave the instruction was Victoria's assistant. Still, Alessandro refused to rush. He understood something important. The people involved were not careless. They had created layers between themselves and the truth. Each person only knew one piece. That was why proving everything mattered. Meanwhile, Mia sat in the garden with Alessandro. She was drawing again. This time, she drew 3 people standing beside a table. Who are they? Alessandro asked.
Mia pointed.
Mommy, you, and me.
Alessandro smiled.
Why did you draw your mother next to me? Mia looked confused by the question. Because she was helping you before you knew. The answer was simple, but it affected him more than any document. Before that day, Alessandro saw Elena as an employee, a person who worked in his home. Now he saw the years of care that he never acknowledged. He realized power had made him blind in a different way. It had not only hidden enemies from him, it had hidden good people too. That night, Marcus brought one final piece of information. They had found a recording from Dr. Hayes's office. It was not enough to prove the entire plan yet, but it revealed something important. Dr. Hayes had warned Victoria that changing too many records would create questions. Victoria had answered with one sentence. By the time anyone asks questions, it will be too late. Alessandro listened without moving. The room was silent. For years, people had feared what Alessandro Moretti would do when betrayed. But the man sitting there was different. He was no longer thinking about revenge. He was thinking about justice. And now he had everything he needed to bring the truth into the only place Victoria could not control. The room where everyone believed her story. The kitchen was the place where everyone once believed the truth could be controlled. It was where Alessandro Moretti had fallen, where people had whispered explanations, and where Victoria Romano had played the role of the perfect person standing beside him. But now, it was the place where her story would begin to fall apart. Alessandro chose that room carefully. Not his office. Not a private meeting room. Not a place where power could hide behind expensive furniture and closed doors. He chose the kitchen because that was where Mia Carter had been ignored, questioned, and underestimated. The same room where a 4-year-old girl noticed what everyone else missed. The people gathered around the table included Victoria, Dr. Hayes, the head chef, Marcus, Elena, and several senior members of the Moretti organization. Victoria entered with confidence. She believed Alessandro was still the man who trusted her without question. I am glad you are feeling better, she said. I think we should focus on moving forward. Alessandro looked at her calmly. We are going to do exactly that.
Victoria smiled.
Good. Then Alessandro placed the blue emergency case on the table. The smile disappeared for a moment. It was brief, but everyone saw it. Do you know why this matters? Alessandro asked. Victoria looked at the case. Because it helped you during an emergency. Alessandro shook his head.
No.
It matters because someone tried to make sure I would never need it again. The room became silent. He did not accuse. He presented facts. Marcus displayed the first piece of evidence. The kitchen access records. Then the supplier account connected to the changed ingredient. Then the missing medical records. Each document showed a separate problem. But together they showed a pattern. Dr. Hayes tried to explain. These records are being misunderstood. Medical information changes over time. That is normal.
Alessandro nodded.
You are right. Records change. But they should not change without the patient knowing. The next evidence appeared on the screen. The communication record between Dr. Hayes and Victoria's assistant. The room changed instantly. Victoria looked toward the assistant, then back at Alessandro. You are making assumptions.
Alessandro answered quietly. No.
I am showing a timeline. That was the difference. He was not the angry man everyone expected. He was a man who had waited until every piece had a place. The head chef was called forward. He admitted that he had received instructions to replace one ingredient in the meal. He thought it was an approved request from management. He never knew the reason behind it. Elena watched quietly as the truth unfolded. For years, she had carried the weight of knowing something was wrong while nobody listened. Now, she did not need to defend herself. The evidence spoke for her. Then Alessandro brought Mia into the room. Not because she needed to prove anything. Not because she was a witness to be questioned. He brought her because the room needed to understand one simple fact. The person they ignored was the person who saved him. Mia stood beside Elena, holding her mother's hand. Alessandro looked around the room. Everyone here had a reason to believe they understood what happened that night. But this child saw one small detail that all of you missed. Victoria tried to remain calm. She is a child. You cannot build a case around a child's memory. Alessandro looked at her. I did not. He pointed to the evidence on the table. I built it around your choices. For the first time, Victoria had nothing to say. The woman who always had the perfect answer was standing in front of facts she could not reshape. Alessandro then turned toward Elena. You tried to warn people. You were ignored. Elena lowered her eyes. I only wanted you to be safe. The words affected the room more than any accusation could, because they revealed the truth behind everything. Elena never wanted power. She never wanted recognition. She only wanted to protect someone who had once trusted her. Alessandro looked at Mia and remembered the first moment she ran toward the blue case. A small child, a small voice, a small action, yet it changed everything. The final document was placed on the table. It was the legal report confirming the evidence would be transferred for official investigation. This was no longer a private family matter. No one could erase it. No one could hide it. Victoria looked around the room and realized something had changed. Alessandro was no longer protecting the image of his life. He was protecting the truth. And the truth had already chosen its side. For years, Alessandro Moretti believed power was measured by how many people stood behind him. The more guards, advisors, and influential names around him, the safer he felt. But after everything that happened, he understood something different. Power was not about how many people followed you. It was about whether the truth could still reach you when everyone else decided to stay silent. In the weeks after the investigation began, the Moretti estate changed completely. The rooms, that once felt controlled and distant, became quieter. People no longer whispered because they were afraid. They whispered because they were finally understanding what had happened. Victoria Romano and the others connected to the scheme were removed from positions where they could influence the investigation. The evidence was handled through the proper legal process. The financial records, medical documents, and communication history created a clear picture of what had happened. Alessandro did not need revenge. He needed accountability. That was the difference between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. But there was one person who still had not received what she deserved.
Elena Carter.
For years, Elena had carried the weight of knowing something was wrong. She had tried to speak. She had tried to protect Alessandro. But because she was an employee and not someone with power, people decided her words mattered less. One morning, Alessandro invited the entire household staff into the main dining room. Elena looked nervous as she entered. She had spent years walking through that same room carrying plates, cleaning tables, and making sure others were comfortable. She never imagined she would be the person everyone was waiting to hear. Alessandro stood at the front of the room. There is something that needs to be corrected, he said. A mistake was made. Not in a document. Not in a business decision. In the way people were treated. He looked toward Elena. She tried to protect me when many others were focused on protecting themselves. The room was silent. She was ignored because of her position, because some people believed a person who worked in this house could not understand the things happening inside it.
Alessandro paused.
They were wrong. Elena looked down, trying to hold back her emotions. She did not want attention. She never asked for it. But this time, she was not being praised because she helped a powerful man. She was being respected because she was right. Mia stood beside her mother, holding the same blue hair clip she had carried throughout everything. Alessandro noticed and smiled. "Mia," he said, "do you know why your mother kept that clip?" Mia looked at it. Because she remembered important things.
Alessandro nodded.
She did. And she reminded me of something important too. He looked around the room. People often look for the loudest person, the richest person, or the most powerful person. But sometimes the person with the smallest voice is the one telling the truth. Mia did not fully understand the meaning behind the words. She only smiled because her mother was smiling. Later that afternoon, Alessandro visited the small garden where Elena used to sit during breaks. It was the same place where Mia had once shown him her drawings. He sat beside the child and watched her color. "Are you still scared of me?" he asked with a small smile. Mia looked confused. "Why would I be scared?"
Alessandro laughed quietly.
It was a sound few people had heard from him. "Because many people are." Mia thought about it for a moment. Then she answered honestly. "Maybe they do not know you." The answer stayed with him. Because she was right. People knew Alessandro Moretti, the businessman. They knew the name. They knew the reputation. They knew the power. But Mia had seen something else. She had seen a person who needed help. Person who could be wrong. Person who could change. The blue emergency case remained in Alessandro's office after that day. Not as a reminder of danger. Not as a symbol of what almost happened. It became a reminder of the moment everything changed. The moment a little girl from a world of few resources showed a man with unlimited resources what he had forgotten. That kindness does not ask about status. That truth does not need permission. And that sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the person who saves everyone else.